Sources say President Trump has reassured European leaders that he will not talk about any possible divisions of territory during his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin tomorrow. Now, yesterday, Trump took part in a phone call with several leaders, including Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. And according to people briefed on the call, Trump said the goal of tomorrow's meeting is to secure a ceasefire in the war. But some leaders got the feeling Trump is not optimistic about what will come out of the summit. Sources tell NBC News all the leaders agreed Ukraine must be included in the negotiations, and Zelensky should be able to decide what territorial concessions he's willing to make. As the Wall Street Journal frames it, President Trump agreed with Europe on Ukraine's red lines for a deal. Later in the day, while speaking to reporters, Trump suggested there could be a second meeting with both Russia and Ukraine.
If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting. But it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting.
Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Let's begin right now live from London. NBC News international correspondent Ralph Sanchez. He's at 10 Downing Street, where Ukrainian President Zelensky just wrapped up a meeting with the British Prime Minister. Ralph, what can you tell us?
Well, guys, good morning. We just watched President Zelensky come through that famous black door of Downing Street. He was embraced by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And this is the latest in a series of very public shows of solidarity that European leaders are making with Zelensky, with Ukraine, as they wait to see what comes out of that summit between President Putin and President Trump in Alaska tomorrow. Zelensky, of course, will not be in the room, will not be at the table. Neither will the European leaders. There is a lot of anxiety on this side of the Atlantic about what President Trump might agree to. And so the Europeans are doing everything they can to try to shape this summit, even if they aren't there in person, aren't there at the negotiating table. They spent hours and hours yesterday in a series of video calls. And at the end of it, President Zelensky said that they had agreed on a number of principles. Number one, that there should be no deal about Ukraine without Ukraine, that Ukraine cannot be excluded from this process. Two, that there needs to be a ceasefire first in the war as a prelude to longer discussions about actually ending the war. Three, he said that Russia cannot be allowed to have a veto over Ukraine potentially joining NATO, joining the European Union. And finally, Zelensky said that if Vladimir Putin does not show seriousness in Alaska, that the United States needs to move ahead with those long-promised sanctions and tariffs. Now, President Trump spoke to that grouping of European leaders and President Zelensky yesterday. It is not clear that he agreed to all of those principles, but he did say that it was a positive series of calls, and he does, as you heard in that sounds you played at the top, seem to be indicating that he does not plan to make any agreement with Putin. He is framing this meeting tomorrow in Alaska as a kind of feeling out discussion, that if it goes well, that if President Trump thinks that there is a landing zone for a deal, he wants to move quickly to a potential three-way meeting between himself, Zelensky, and Putin. He did also say, when asked by reporters, that he was prepared to press ahead with economic consequences for Russia if Putin does not show he's serious about a ceasefire. But we have heard that from the president before, deadlines set without sanctions being imposed. Now, parts of the Russian delegation have already made their way to Alaska ahead of that sit-down tomorrow, and we are expecting to hear more from the Kremlin about this later on in the day. Guys.
All right. NBC News' Ralph Sanchez at 10 Downing. Thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it. John, it is very interesting, some of the news that has been coming out over the past 12 to 24 hours. One, that the president has agreed to the red lines that Ukraine has set out there, and also that there won't be territorial concessions without having Ukraine in. Talk about, again, in this ever-evolving relationship with Vladimir Putin, what you're hearing about the meeting, the meaning for the meeting, and Jonathan Lemire, what comes next.
So we will see what happens tomorrow. There's a lot about tomorrow we still don't know. The agenda is still being set, reflecting how hastily thrown together this news conference has been. Certainly, as we've chronicled on this show, President Trump for months now has really soured rhetorically on Vladimir Putin, angry, embarrassed even that Putin is ignoring his calls for a ceasefire. This week, publicly injecting a little more notes of hope, saying that he thinks some sort of agreement can be reached, but Europeans encouraged by what they heard on that call yesterday. Trump telling them he wouldn't give away territory. Trump again suggesting that this is more of a feeling out meeting, but he hopes that some sort of ceasefire, even a tentative one, the framework of one, could be reached as soon as tomorrow. We'll see. As far as a possible subsequent trilateral meeting, Trump, Putin, Zelensky, Trump wants one. Zelensky certainly wants one. The Kremlin hasn't said they'll agree to that yet. In fact, to this point, they have said that they wouldn't have Putin sit down with Zelensky because they don't want to legitimize Zelensky and his government. So there's a lot here still to be determined. One note, Kremlin just a few moments ago, perhaps getting ahead of the White House in announcing the agenda for tomorrow, saying the two men, Trump and Putin, will hold a joint news conference at the conclusion of their summit in Alaska. That, of course, will be shades of Helsinki when the two men appeared together in 2018. We should note that the one time President Biden met with Putin, that was in 2021 in Geneva, the two men did not hold a news conference. White House has not confirmed this, but Kremlin seems to suggest they want the two men to appear together, which perhaps a sign of some confidence that they'll feel okay about how tomorrow goes.